Hi there, Mr. Biggers here, and today we're jumping in Module 5, Lesson 2. This is the first day of a two-day note activity and a note assignment, okay? So today we're going to learn about equations of both parallel lines and perpendicular lines. So parallel lines are really cool because their slopes are really super easy to understand. They have slopes that are the same, okay? So if I had two lines and say line A had a slope of 2, guess what line B is going to have? It's also going to have a slope of 2, okay? So parallel lines, they're always nice. They run next to each other. They're never going to touch. They have the same slope. Their rise over run is going to be exactly the same. Perpendicular lines, on the other hand, like to be different. They have slopes that are known as opposite reciprocals. For example, if I have a slope of 2, the opposite reciprocal of that is going to flip it over a fraction. So it's going to become 1 over 2. And it's opposite, so it has to be negative, okay? So not only does it flip that 2 over a fraction, it makes it negative, okay? I'm going to do one more example. If line A had a slope of, let's say, 1/2, or let's do 1/3, okay? The opposite reciprocal, it needs to flip it back over a fraction. So the slope would be 3 over 1. Since 1/3 is positive, the 3 over 1 needs to become negative. And just to do one more, if I had a slope of negative 1/5, the opposite reciprocal of negative 1/5 is going to flip it. So it's going to be 5 over 1. Once again, it's opposite. So since this one is negative, this one becomes a positive, okay? So those are some examples of opposite reciprocal slopes. These are the kind of weird guys, all right? So perpendicular lines look like this, and they intersect at a 90-degree angle, which you don't really have to worry about right now, but they're the weird ones. So those are the slopes that you're going to be looking for perpendicular lines. So state whether the following are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. And then this note here is kind of important. So to find the slope, you must first write it in slope-intercept form, which we all know is y equals mx plus b, where m is always going to be our slope. So if we look at example 1, both of them are already written in y equals mx plus b. To figure out if they're parallel, perpendicular, or neither, we need to compare their slopes. So the first line has a slope of negative 2/3 because that's the number in front of the x. The second line has a slope of 3/2. So the opposite reciprocal of this, remember, we're going to flip it. So instead of the 3 being on the bottom, it's on the top now. Instead of the 2 being on the top, it's on the bottom. And then, since this is negative, we have to make our opposite a positive. Since that is opposite reciprocal, we know that these lines are perpendicular. So these are perpendicular lines because they have opposite reciprocal slopes. Example 2, this one is good, y equals mx plus b. You can see y equals. This one, not good. We have to solve for y first. So to solve for y, what we need to do is rewrite it, and then we're going to subtract our x to both sides. 1 and x are not like terms, so you're going to get y equals negative x minus 1, okay? Your slope, this is a tricky one, is that number right in front of the x. So your slope for this line is negative 1. Your slope for this line is that number in front of the x, negative 1 over 4. Those are not the same, and they're definitely not opposite reciprocal slopes. So these are neither parallel or perpendicular. All right, example 3. We need to make sure we're solved for y. So we can see the first one is not solved for y. So what we need to do is solve it. So I'm going to minus the 4x from both sides. That first equation is going to become y equals negative 4x minus 2. Now we're going to compare the slopes. The slope of this line is negative 4. And the slope of this line is also negative 4. We know if two lines or two equations have the same slope, then they are parallel lines. Okay. Feel free to pause the video, rewind if you need to see it at any other point, if you need to see how to do these again. In example 4, this one is slope-intercept form. We automatically know the slope is negative 2. This one is not slope-intercept form. So we have to, remember, solve for y. So what I'm going to do is we have to get rid of the 4. We also have to get rid of the 2x. So I'm going to set this up as an equation and solve it really quick. You're going to be left with 4y equals negative 2x plus 16. And then we had to divide both sides by negative 4. This is where you're going to use your calculator to simplify that fraction. So remember, negative 2 over 4 can reduce. So what we're going to get as an equation is negative 1/2 x plus 4. So now I'm looking here. I've got a slope of negative 1/2. So we're comparing our slopes. And I have a slope of negative 2. So here's the thing with that. This is a negative and this is a negative. So even though 2's reciprocal is 1/2, it's not an opposite reciprocal, because if it is a negative 2, like what we have, the opposite reciprocal would need to be positive 1/2, which we have a negative 1/2. So as much as it looks like it wants to be an opposite reciprocal, it's not. So both of these lines don't have the same slope. They're not opposite reciprocal, so it's neither parallel or perpendicular. Okay. All right, example 5. We are going to write an equation of a line that is parallel to this line, okay? So remember, when we are writing an equation of a line, we are automatically thinking slope-intercept form. So whenever we write an equation of a line, I want you to write out these 4 things. An x, a y, an m, and a b. We want to go through our problem and see what we have given to us. Now, this says it's parallel to this line, which means, guess what? This is not the equation we want to write. Our line that we need to write has a parallel slope. So what's the slope of this line? The slope of this line here is going to be negative 2. So I know if it's a parallel lines, do they have the same slope or do they have opposite reciprocal? Parallel lines have the same slope. So that means my m has to be negative 2. Okay, we know that right off the bat. I also know this point that they gave us here, 3, 5. So the x is 3 and the y is 5. Now we're back to what we were doing the other day, where we have to figure out what is our equation of the line. So I'm going to take our slope-intercept form and plug everything in. 5 equals, the slope is negative 2. X is 3 plus b. This is where you can use your calculators to calculate this. Negative 2 times 3 is going to get you an answer of negative 6. Negative 6 plus b is equal to 5. Then you're real quick going to add 6 to both sides because it's a negative and you want to get rid of the negative. So you get b is equal to 11. So now that we have our slope and our y-intercept, remember those are the 2 things you need to write an equation of a line, you can go ahead and write the equation of the line that's parallel. Okay? So the equation is going to be y equals mx plus b. We know that the m is going to be negative 2. We know that the b that we found is going to be 11. So if we rewrite that, it's y equals negative 2x plus 11. And that's the equation of the line that we want. If you feel good about this, I want you to try the next one. So pause the video, try the next one. The only thing to notice though, perpendicular, remember it's going to be an opposite reciprocal slope. Okay, now I'm gonna go ahead and do it. So if you don't want to get it spoiled, go ahead and work it out. Otherwise, I'm going over it. So perpendicular, okay? Remember, that means opposite opposite reciprocal slope. So if we look at the original line that we want, so this is not the line that we want as our answer. This is just a line we're borrowing to see what the slope is. They said it's perpendicular to this line. So the slope of that line is -2. So I need to figure out what's the opposite reciprocal of -2. So -2, we need to flip it over a fraction. So I'm going to change -2 to -2/1, and then I'm going to flip it. So what we're going to do is we are going to flip it around. So we're going to have 1 on the top. We are going to have 2 on the bottom. And remember, we need to make it opposite. So the opposite of a negative is a positive. So the opposite reciprocal slope for the perpendicular line is +1/2. This is the slope that we need for our line. Okay. Now, it's not too hard to go from here because you just have to identify what the problem gives you. So it says write an equation of a line that is perpendicular to this equation, and it goes through this point. Well, we already worked hard to find our slope. Remember, the two things you need are your slope and your y-intercept. So, to find the y-intercept, we are going to borrow the coordinate they give us, 4 and -6. This is where we pull our slope-intercept form and plug everything in. That's the whole point of keeping track of all these numbers off to the side. So when we plug in what we have, we know our y is -6. We know our slope is 1/2. And we know our x is 4. And then we have our y-intercept plus b. Then we just multiply it out. This is why we have calculators. 1/2 times 4 is an easy peasy 8. So 8 plus b equals -6. And then we're going to go ahead and minus that both sides. 8 minus 8 is gone. You get b is equal to -14. Make sure you do those negatives in the calculator. Easy mistakes there that could be had. So we're looking at our problem here. We have the slope. We have the y-intercept. Now we can write the equation of our line. So remember, y equals mx plus b. The m is 1/2. And the b is -14. So then we just fill in the rest. 1/2 x minus 14. And that is the equation of a line that's perpendicular to that other line and passes through the point for -6. So feel free to pause the video to take any of these notes. Make sure you understand that opposite reciprocal, and there are some other videos attached to the assignment on Canvas as well if you need it. Good luck on the assignment, and make sure you go back over these. And real quick, before I end the video though, I want to jump into the assignment just so that way I can touch on a couple things before you get working on it. So if you see this assignment here, this is what you're going to have today. You're going to do 1 through 7 for the assignment. So slope of a parallel line, perpendicular line, make sure you look at the equation that they give you. In this case, it's y equals x plus 8. You're going to find the slope of a parallel line, which remember has the same slope. So I'm going to go ahead and answer this here. It should be a slope of, let's see if I can write it in. No, it won't let me. Slope of 8. And then remember, perpendicular line, it's going to flip it over a fraction. So 1/8, and then it has to be opposite. Sorry. Not 8. Don't make that silly mistake. The slope is the number in front of the x. So the slope is 1. If you flip 1 over a fraction, guess what it becomes? 1, but it has to be negative. Okay? So those would be your two answers for that question. Check my answer. Boom, there I'm good. So I think 1 through 3 are like that. Number 4 gets a little tricky. Remember, you're going to have to solve for y to find your slopes. Then you're going to compare all 3 of those lines and see what's parallel, what's perpendicular, what's neither. So you're going to keep going through that, and then you're going to write equations of a line, much how we did on the notes for number 7, okay? So this should take it a little bit. Alex gives you a calculator. You're welcome to use the calculators that we have in class as well. And good luck. Try your best. Make sure you don't turn anything in for the day 1 of this assignment.